They laughed when the blonde girl with the bright smile walked into Fort Benning wearing combat boots 2 sizes too big. They whispered jokes about Daddy's money and privilege, but nobody was laughing when the army captain stepped out of the black SUV and she ran toward him, calling out a single word that made every soldier freeze: Dad. Before we continue, drop a comment below telling us what city or country you're watching this video from. The Georgia sun hammered down on the asphalt of Fort Benning like a vengeful god, turning the air into something you could chew. It was July, the worst month to arrive at any military installation in the South, and 22-year-old Madison Cole knew it. She stepped off the bus with her duffel bag slung over one shoulder, blonde hair pulled back in a regulation bun that was already losing its fight against the humidity, and blue eyes scanning the formation of soldiers waiting near the training facility entrance. She wore the same standard-issue uniform as everyone else, but somehow on her it looked different. Maybe it was the way her boots seemed too clean, too new. Maybe it was the way she carried herself with a kind of careful grace that didn't belong in a place designed to break people down and rebuild them harder. The whispers started immediately. A group of male recruits near the obstacle course fence noticed her first, elbowing each other and grinning. One of them, a broad-shouldered guy with a Tennessee drawl and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite, muttered something that made his buddies laugh. Madison heard the word Barbie float across the distance between them. She kept walking, her jaw set, her eyes forward. She had heard worse. She would hear worse. This was just the beginning. Staff Sergeant Derek Hale was waiting at the intake building, clipboard in hand, expression carved from pure military stone. He was a lifer, 38 years old, with 2 deployments in Afghanistan and 1 in Iraq, and he had seen every kind of soldier walk through these gates. The eager ones who washed out in a week, the angry ones who thought the army owed them something, the quiet ones who surprised everyone. He looked at Madison Cole's paperwork and then at her face, and something in his expression flickered. It might have been doubt. It might have been pity. "Cole, Madison A," he read aloud, his voice like gravel in a cement mixer, "says here you're volunteering for the Ranger Assessment and Selection Program." He looked up. "That right?" Madison nodded. "Yes, Staff Sergeant." Hale's eyes narrowed. "You know what that means, Cole. You know what you're signing up for." "I do, Staff Sergeant." 61 days of hell, physical torture, mental breakdown, sleep deprivation. Most men quit. You understand that? Most men. Madison's voice didn't waver. "I'm not here to quit, Staff Sergeant." Hale studied her for a long moment, then made a mark on his clipboard. "We'll see about that." He handed her a key card and a building number. "Barracks are that way. Formation at 0500 tomorrow. Don't be late, and don't expect anyone to hold your hand." He turned away before she could respond, already moving on to the next recruit. Madison stood there for a moment, feeling the weight of 100 invisible eyes on her back, then shouldered her bag and headed toward the barracks. The female barracks at Fort Benning were newer than the male ones, a political concession made after years of integration debates and policy changes. Madison's room was small, Spartan, with 2 metal bunks, 2 footlockers, and a window that looked out onto the training field. Her roommate was already there, a wiry woman with dark skin, close-cropped hair, and the kind of lean muscle that came from years of hard work, not gym memberships. She looked up when Madison entered, her expression neutral but evaluating. "You, the Ranger candidate?" she asked. Madison nodded, dropping her duffel onto the empty bunk. "Madison Cole." The woman stood and offered a hand. "Corporal Janine Williams. I'm just finishing up infantry training before I head to Fort Hood." Her grip was firm, professional. "You know they're already talking about you, right?" Madison started unpacking, keeping her face neutral. "Let them talk." Janine leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Look, I'm not trying to scare you, but RASP is no joke. I've seen guys who looked like they could bench press a truck get carted out on stretchers. And you—" she gestured vaguely. "No offense, but you look like you just walked off a college campus." Madison pulled out a framed photograph and set it on the small shelf above her bunk. It showed a man in army dress uniform, captain's bars gleaming on his shoulders, standing next to a younger version of Madison at her high school graduation. Both were smiling. The man had the same blue eyes, the same strong jawline. "My father," Madison said quietly, "Captain Raymond Cole. 23 years of service. 2 Purple Hearts. He trained with the 75th Ranger Regiment before moving into Logistics Command." She turned to face Janine. "He never told me the army would be easy. He told me it would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. And he told me that if I was going to do it, I had to do it right. Not for him, for me." Janine's expression softened slightly. "Military family, huh? 3rd generation. Does he know you're here? Trying for RASP?" Madison's smile was small, sad. "He knows. He's not happy about it, but he respects it." She sat on the edge of her bunk. "He wanted me to go officer track, college ROTC, the safe route. But I needed to prove something first, to myself." Janine nodded slowly. "All right, Cole, I respect that, but word of advice, don't mention your dad around here. These guys, especially the ones who've been grinding their way up from nothing, they'll eat you alive if they think you're getting special treatment or riding on Daddy's coattails." Madison's eyes hardened. "I'm not riding on anything. I'm here on my own merit. I believe you, but they won't, not at first." Janine grabbed her jacket from the hook by the door. "Formations at 1700 for dinner. I'll walk with you, show you the ropes, and Cole..." She paused at the door. "Keep your head down and your mouth shut for the first week. Let your work speak for you. That's the only language these guys understand." The dining facility was a massive concrete structure that smelled like industrial cleaner, overcooked vegetables, and anxiety. Madison followed Janine through the line, grabbing a tray of something that might have been chicken, might have been rubber, and found a seat at a table near the back. The noise was overwhelming, hundreds of voices bouncing off metal and tile, but underneath it all was a current of tension. She could feel eyes on her, could hear the whispers starting up again. A group of RASP candidates at a nearby table were staring openly, their conversation pausing as she sat down. One of them, the same Tennessee guy from earlier, stood up and walked over. Up close, he was even bigger. Maybe 6'3", with arms like tree trunks and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Well, well," he said, loud enough for half the cafeteria to hear. "Look what we got here. A real-life Barbie doll trying to play soldier." His buddies laughed. "What's your name, princess?" Madison looked up, her voice steady. "Private Cole." "Private Cole," he repeated mockingly. "You got a first name, Private Cole?" "Madison. Madison," he drawled, turning the name into something syrupy and condescending. "That's real pretty. Tell me, Madison, what makes you think you can hang with the Rangers? You know what we do? We eat dirt and bullets for breakfast. We don't have time to babysit sorority girls who watch too many war movies." Madison set down her fork, her blue eyes meeting his without flinching. "I'm not asking to be babysat. I'm asking to be trained." The guy leaned down, putting his hands on the table. "Listen, sweetheart, I'm trying to save you some pain here. RASP will destroy you. The ruck marches alone will break your back. The land navigation will get you lost and hypothermic. The combatives will put you in the hospital. And that's before we even get to the real tests." He straightened up, crossing his massive arms. "Why don't you do yourself a favor and transfer to something more your speed? Public affairs, maybe. Or admin. Nobody will judge you." Around them, the cafeteria had gone quieter, everyone watching the confrontation. Madison could feel the weight of expectation, the assumption that she would back down, apologize, maybe even cry. Instead, she stood up, and even though she was a full head shorter than this walking mountain of muscle, she didn't look away. "What's your name?" she asked. He seemed surprised by the question. "Kowalski. Private First Class Ryan Kowalski." "Well, Private First Class Kowalski," Madison said, her voice carrying across the now silent dining facility. "I appreciate your concern. But I didn't come here for easy. I came here to earn the tab, same as you, and if I wash out, it won't be because I didn't try. It'll be because I wasn't good enough. But I won't know that unless I try, will I? She picked up her tray. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a formation to prepare for. She walked away, leaving Kowalski standing there with his mouth slightly open, and deposited her tray at the wash station. The cafeteria slowly returned to normal noise levels, but Madison could feel the shift in the air. She had drawn a line. Whether that was smart or suicidal, she would find out soon enough. The first week of RASP was designed with one purpose: to make candidates quit. The training cadre, hard-faced men with ranger tabs sewn onto their shoulders and eyes that had seen things most people only had nightmares about, pushed the recruits past every conceivable limit. They ran until their legs were jelly. They did push-ups until their arms failed. They crawled through mud under barbed wire, while instructors fired blanks over their heads and threw smoke grenades that made the world disappear into choking grey nothing. Madison threw up twice on the first day, once from exhaustion and once from sheer determination not to quit, when every fibre of her being screamed to just stop, just give up, just ring the bell that would end all the pain. But she didn't ring the bell. Neither did Kowalski or most of the other candidates, though several did, their silhouettes disappearing into trucks that would take them back to regular army units where life was hard but not impossible. By day 3, Madison's hands were blistered from rope climbs, her shoulders were purple with bruises from the rucksack, and she had a limp from landing wrong on an obstacle. But she was still there, still moving, still trying. The breaking point came on day 5, during a 20-mile ruck march through the Georgia backwoods. Each candidate carried 65 pounds of gear, plus water, weapon, and whatever god-awful weight the instructors decided to add just to make it interesting. They started at 0300 in pitch darkness, headlamps bobbing like fireflies as they trudged along dirt roads that turned into muddy trails, that turned into vertical climbs through underbrush that tore at exposed skin like tiny knives. Madison's world narrowed to the simple rhythm of left foot, right foot, breathe, keep moving. Her ruck straps dug into her shoulders like meat hooks. Her boots felt like they were filled with broken glass, but she kept moving. Around mile 15, Kowalski started having problems. She heard it first as a change in the rhythm of boots hitting ground behind her, then as a muttered curse, then as a stumble. She glanced back and saw him limping badly, his face twisted in pain. One of the instructors, a stone-faced sergeant with a voice like a chainsaw, immediately zeroed in on him. "Kowalski, you falling apart on me?" "No, Sergeant," Kowalski gasped, but his limp betrayed him. "Then pick up the pace." Madison slowed slightly, adjusting her stride to fall back alongside Kowalski. He glanced at her, his expression a mix of pain and shame. "Don't," he muttered. "Don't help me. You'll just get yourself smoked." "Shut up and keep walking," Madison said quietly. She reached into her side pocket and pulled out 2 ibuprofen tablets, palming them as she pretended to adjust her weapon sling. "Take these. Don't let them see." Kowalski hesitated, then took the pills, swallowing them dry. "Why?" he asked. "Because that's what Rangers do," Madison said. "We don't leave people behind." They finished the march together, crossing the final checkpoint as the sun was rising over the trees, turning the world gold and red. Kowalski collapsed onto the ground, his face grey with exhaustion. Madison sat down beside him, her own body screaming in protest. Around them, other candidates were doing the same, some lying flat on their backs, some throwing up, some just staring into space with the 1,000-yard stare of the truly broken. The instructors moved among them like sharks, evaluating, judging, deciding who would continue and who would be sent home. Staff Sergeant Hale stopped in front of Madison and Kowalski, his expression unreadable. "Cole," he said, "you helped Kowalski finish." It wasn't a question. Madison looked up at him, too tired to lie. "Yes, Staff Sergeant. You know that's not how this works. This is an individual assessment. You're supposed to worry about yourself, not play nursemaid to the weak." Kowalski tried to push himself up. Sergeant, I didn't ask you, Kowalski. Hale's eyes never left Madison's face. Cole, you want to explain your thinking? Madison took a breath, choosing her words carefully. Staff Sergeant, I don't think it's weak to help a teammate who's hurting. I think it's what makes us stronger than the enemy. They fight for ideology or fear. We fight for each other. And if I can't be trusted to have my brothers back on a training march, how can anyone trust me to have it in combat? Hale was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Interesting perspective, Cole. He turned to address all the candidates within earshot. Listen up. Cole just gave you all a lesson in what the Ranger Creed actually means. It's not about being the toughest individual. It's about making everyone around you tougher. It's about refusing to accept failure in yourself or your teammates. Remember that. He walked away, leaving Madison and Kowalski staring at each other in confusion and relief. After that day, something shifted in the platoon. Kowalski stopped making jokes about Barbie dolls. Other candidates started asking Madison for advice on gear adjustments, on how to tape blisters, on the mental trick she used to push through pain. She didn't become popular exactly, but she earned something more valuable: respect. And in the brutal meritocracy of Ranger training, respect was everything. The weeks ground on. Land navigation exercises, where Madison proved she could read a map better than most of the men, finding her waypoints in record time even in the middle of the night, with nothing but a compass and a red lens flashlight. Combatives training, where she got thrown around like a rag doll by guys twice her size, but learned to use leverage and technique to compensate for strength, and eventually managed to tap out a specialist who outweighed her by 80 pounds. Water confidence exercises, where they had to swim across a lake in full gear, then tread water for 20 minutes, then swim back, and Madison discovered that her smaller frame actually gave her an advantage in buoyancy and efficiency of movement. But the test that would define everything came on day 47 during the live fire exercise. This was the culmination of everything they had learned: squad tactics, communication, fire and maneuver, medical evacuation, all under the stress of real bullets flying overhead and real explosions going off close enough to rattle teeth. The scenario was simple. Their squad had to assault a fortified position, eliminate the enemy, and secure the objective while taking minimal casualties. Failure was not an option. Madison's squad leader was a hard-charging sergeant named Ramirez, who had already been through RASP once and was back for recertification after an injury. He assigned Madison to the support by fire position with Kowalski, their job to provide covering fire while the assault element maneuvered on the objective. It was a critical role, requiring precise fire control and constant communication. One mistake could mean friendly casualties. They moved into position in the pre-dawn darkness, crawling through thick underbrush, until they had a clear line of sight on the target building. Madison set up her M4, checking her magazines, adjusting her optic. Beside her, Kowalski did the same, his breathing steady now, focused. They had trained together for weeks, and there was an unspoken understanding between them. When Ramirez gave the signal over the radio, they would own this battlefield. Support by fire. This is Ramirez. Stand by. Roger, Madison whispered into her radio mic. The assault element began their movement, shadows flickering between trees. Madison tracked them through her optic, finger resting alongside the trigger guard, ready but patient. The enemy position was still quiet, the role players inside waiting for the right moment to spring their ambush. Suddenly, a door on the side of the building burst open and a figure appeared with a rifle, aiming directly at the assault element. "Contact right!" Ramirez's voice crackled over the radio, urgent but controlled. Madison didn't hesitate. She acquired the target, breathed out, and squeezed the trigger twice in rapid succession. The blank rounds kicked against her shoulder, and the role player immediately threw his hands up and dropped, playing dead. "Target down!" she called over the radio. Beside her, Kowalski was already engaging another threat from a window, his rifle barking steadily. The firefight lasted 3 minutes that felt like 3 hours. Madison's world narrowed to the sight picture through her optic, the feel of the trigger, the recoil impulse, the smooth motion of transitioning between targets. Her training took over, muscle memory and mental discipline combining into something that felt almost like meditation. She wasn't thinking about being a woman in a man's world. She wasn't thinking about her father or proving herself or any of it. She was just doing the job, the way she had been trained to do it. When Ramirez finally called, "Clear, objective secure," Madison safed her weapon and took a shaky breath, realizing that her hands were trembling now that the adrenaline was fading. Kowalski looked over at her, his face split in a huge grin. "Holy shit, Cole. You were surgical out there. Did you see that shot on the guy in the doorway? That was at least 200 meters. 210, Madison said, checking her rangefinder. Wind was pushing left to right at about 5 miles per hour. One of the range instructors, a captain with a ranger tab and a sniper qualification badge, appeared behind them. "Cole, Kowalski, on your feet." They scrambled up, expecting criticism. Instead, the captain nodded approvingly. "That was textbook support by fire. Cole, your target identification and engagement speed were outstanding. You just saved Ramirez's life, at least in simulation terms." He made notes on his clipboard. "Strong work." As he walked away, Kowalski turned to Madison with something like awe in his eyes. "You know what? I was wrong about you, way wrong. You're not here because of your dad or because you got something to prove. You're here because you're actually good at this, like scary good." Madison felt a warm flush of pride but tamped it down. "We're all here because we're good at it," she said. "That's the point." The final week of RASP was called the Suck Fest by those who had survived it, and the name was apt. Sleep deprivation, constant physical evolution, surprise inspections, psychological stress tests designed to make candidates crack under pressure. Madison walked through it in a fog of exhaustion, held together by sheer stubborn refusal to quit. On the final night, they were given a scenario: hostage rescue, time-sensitive target, limited intelligence. They had to plan and execute the entire mission in 6 hours, including movement to the objective. Madison was chosen as one of the squad leaders, a role that put her in charge of 4 other candidates, including Kowalski. They huddled around a map table in the planning room, red light casting eerie shadows, and worked through the problem step by step: infiltration route, actions on the objective, casualty evacuation plan, contingencies for every possible thing that could go wrong. When they briefed their plan to the evaluation cadre, Staff Sergeant Hale actually smiled, just a little. "Solid," he said. "Execute." The mission went almost perfectly. They breached the building, killed the role-playing enemy fighters with blank fire and mil-sim weapons, secured the hostages, and extracted under simulated enemy fire. When they crossed back into friendly territory, exhausted and filthy and triumphant, the evaluators were waiting. Hale approached Madison and extended his hand. "Congratulations, Private Cole. You passed. Welcome to the 75th Ranger Regiment." Madison shook his hand, too overwhelmed to speak. Around her, other candidates were celebrating, hugging, some crying with relief. Kowalski picked her up in a bear hug, spinning her around. "We did it! Holy shit, we actually did it!" The graduation ceremony was held 3 days later, after they had all had a chance to sleep, shower, and recover some semblance of humanity. Madison stood in formation wearing her dress uniform, the tan beret sitting perfectly on her head, the black and gold ranger tab sewn onto her left shoulder. Her heart was pounding, not from fear, but from anticipation. She had called her father the night before, told him when and where the ceremony would be. He had been quiet on the phone, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll be there," he had said. "I'm proud of you, Maddie, so proud." The base commander was making a speech about honor and tradition when Madison saw the black SUV pull up to the edge of the parade ground. Her breath caught. The driver's door opened, and Captain Raymond Cole stepped out in his dress uniform, medals gleaming in the afternoon sun. He was older than in the photograph, his hair more grey than blonde now, lines carved deep around his eyes. But he stood straight and proud, and when he saw Madison in formation, his face split into a smile that looked like sunrise. The ceremony continued, but Madison was barely aware of it. She kept glancing toward where her father stood at the back, beside other family members who had come to watch their soldiers graduate. When the commander finally dismissed the formation, Madison didn't run. She walked, her steps measured and purposeful, her bearing everything a ranger should be. But when she got close enough, when she saw the tears standing in her father's eyes, she couldn't help herself. "Dad," she said, and then she was hugging him, and he was hugging her back so hard it hurt. "You did it," he whispered into her hair. "You actually did it." "I learned from the best," Madison said. They pulled apart, and Captain Cole wiped his eyes unself-consciously. Behind Madison, she could hear voices, other graduates noticing the captain's bars, the multiple deployment patches, the ribbons and badges that marked a career of distinguished service. Someone muttered, "Wait, is that her dad?" Another voice, louder, "Her dad's a captain?" She never said anything. Kowalski approached, his own family in tow, and he stopped when he saw Captain Cole. Recognition flickered across his face. "Sir," he said, coming to attention and saluting, "it's an honor. I read about your actions in Kandahar. That's textbook leadership under fire." Captain Cole returned the salute, then extended his hand. "At ease, soldier. You must be Kowalski. Maddie mentioned you in her letters, said you two looked out for each other." Kowalski shook his hand, looking somewhat starstruck. "Sir, your daughter is one of the best soldiers I've ever trained with. She saved my ass on more than one occasion." "She has a habit of doing that," Captain Cole said, smiling. "She gets it from her mother." He turned back to Madison, his expression serious now. "You know this is just the beginning, right? The tab means you've met the standard. Now you have to exceed it every single day on every mission. The regiment doesn't accept anything less than excellence." "I know, Dad," Madison said. "I'm ready." "I know you are." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small black box. "This was your grandfather's. He carried it through Vietnam. I carried it through Iraq and Afghanistan, and now I want you to have it." He opened the box to reveal a simple compass, brass worn smooth with age, the glass face scratched but intact. "It's not about finding your way on a map. It's about finding your way when everything else is chaos, when you're lost and scared and don't know what to do. It'll always point north, and north is home. North is your true self." Madison took the compass, her hands shaking slightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "I'll take care of it." "I know you will." Captain Cole looked around at the other graduates, at the families celebrating, at the ranger instructors watching with satisfaction. "You know, they all doubted you at first. I can see it in their faces, the surprise that you made it. But you proved something important today, Maddie. Not just to them, to yourself. You proved that courage isn't about how big you are or how loud you can yell. It's about showing up every day and doing the work, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard." Staff Sergeant Hale approached, nodding respectfully to Captain Cole. "Sir, just wanted to say, your daughter is the real deal. We put her through the ringer, and she never complained, never made excuses. She just kept driving forward. That's Ranger mentality right there." "Appreciate that, Staff Sergeant," Captain Cole said. "But she didn't do it because of me. She did it because of who she is." Hale turned to Madison. "Cole, you've got orders to report to 2nd Battalion at Hunter Army Airfield in 2 weeks. Use that time to rest up, because the real work starts when you get there. And one more thing." He lowered his voice slightly. "There are going to be people at Battalion who doubt you, who think RASP was just checking a diversity box. You're going to have to prove yourself all over again. Can you handle that?" Madison met his eyes without flinching. "Staff Sergeant, I've been proving myself my whole life. I can handle 2 more weeks and 2 more years and 2 more decades, if that's what it takes." Hale smiled, a rare, genuine expression. "Outstanding." Ranger, lead the way, Cole. All the way, Staff Sergeant. As the sun set over Fort Benning, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Madison stood with her father and watched the other graduates taking photos, celebrating with their families, beginning the next chapter of their military careers. She felt the weight of the compass in her pocket, the pride swelling in her chest, the bone-deep satisfaction of having accomplished something truly difficult. But more than that, she felt ready. Ready for whatever came next, ready to serve with honor, ready to live up to the tab on her shoulder and the legacy of the Rangers who had come before her. "Dad," she said quietly, "thank you for not trying to stop me." Captain Cole put his arm around her shoulders. "Maddie, I learned a long time ago that you can't stop the tide. You can either ride it or get swept away. You were always going to do this, one way or another. I'm just grateful I get to see you succeed." He paused, then added with a smile, "Though I reserve the right to worry about you constantly." "Deal," Madison said, laughing. "I'd be disappointed if you didn't." They stood there together as the evening turned to night, two soldiers connected by blood and honor, watching the future unfold under a sky full of stars. And in that moment, Madison Cole understood something profound, that true strength wasn't about proving you were better than anyone else. It was about proving to yourself that you could be more than you ever thought possible. It was about refusing to accept limits, even when everyone else told you they existed. It was about standing up when you'd been knocked down, helping others when you were barely standing yourself, and always, always moving forward. The blonde girl they had mocked on that first day was gone. In her place stood a ranger, forged in fire and sweat and determination. And when she finally walked away from that parade ground, her father beside her and her future stretching out like an unwritten book, she knew with absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Years later, after deployments and medals and missions she could never talk about, after leading her own squad through the chaos of real combat, after training the next generation of Rangers and watching them earn their tabs just as she had earned hers, Madison Cole would remember that graduation day. She would remember her father's face, Kowalski's respect, Hale's rare smile. But most of all, she would remember the feeling of standing in formation, the tan beret on her head, the tab on her shoulder, and knowing that she had done it. Not because of her father's legacy or anyone's expectations, but because she had the courage to try and the strength to endure and the heart to never ever give up. That was what it meant to be a Ranger. And that was what it meant to be Madison Cole. If you believe that courage and determination can overcome any obstacle, if you believe that true strength comes from within, if you believe that honor means showing up and doing the work, no matter how hard it gets, comment warrior below. And tell us, what's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished that everyone said you couldn't do?